Number 10. The smallest country no one should underestimate. There is a country in Northern Europe so small that many globes barely have enough room to write its name. A country that most people couldn't locate on a map without a moment's hesitation, and yet it has achieved something no other nation has managed in the same way, completely reinventing itself from scratch. Twice in less than 100 years. It's called Estonia, and once you start to get to know it, it becomes impossible to ignore. Estonia sits in northeastern Europe, bordered by the Gulf of Finland to the north, the Baltic Sea to the west, Latvia to the south, and Russia to the east. Its area is a mere 45,228 square kilometers, making it slightly smaller than Denmark, and its population is around 1.3 million people, a figure that makes it one of the least populated countries on the European continent. To give you an idea of the level of silence that implies, there are individual cities in China or Brazil that have more inhabitants than the entire territory of Estonia. But what Estonia lacks in size, it makes up for in an intensity of history, nature, and originality rarely found in more famous places. More than 50% of the territory is covered in forests. The country has over 2,000 islands scattered along its Baltic coast, most of them completely uninhabited. Swamps and peat bogs cover vast expanses that in spring transform into mirrors of water under endless skies. And in winter, when the sun barely peeks out for a few hours a day and darkness blankets the landscape, Estonia becomes something out of an old Nordic tale. The capital is Tallinn, an extraordinarily well-preserved medieval city that combines 13th century towers with one of the most advanced digital infrastructures on the planet. The contrast between the Gothic cobblestones and the ultra-high-speed internet connection speaks volumes about how this country operates, with one foot firmly planted in the past and the other pointing toward a future that has yet to arrive for most of the world. Economically, Estonia has transformed an economy devastated by decades of Soviet occupation into one of the most dynamic in Eastern Europe. Its per capita GDP exceeds $22,000, and the country has the lowest public debt in the European Union. Before we continue, tell me, had you heard of Estonia before this video? What country in the world are you watching from right now? Number 9. The quiet beauty of Estonian women. There's something about Estonian women that first surprises travelers upon arriving in the country, and it's not just their physical appearance, although that certainly has its charm. It's the combination of an almost austere Nordic beauty with an independence and self-assurance that needs no external validation to sustain them. Estonian women are, by ancestry, mostly of Finno-Ugric origin, the same ethnic group as the Finns and Hungarians, although centuries of coexistence with Germans, Swedes, Danes, and Russians have created a blend of features ranging from the purest blonde hair and the lightest eyes to darker tones and more defined features. What predominates is a discreet elegance, fair skin, delicate bones, a way of moving that doesn't seek to be noticed but inevitably is. Estonian style in the cities is surprisingly modern and sophisticated for a country of its size. Tallinn has an emerging fashion scene that blends Scandinavian design with Eastern European sobriety, and young Estonian women navigate these influences with an ease that suggests they aren't following trends. They're creating their own. However, in rural areas and on the archipelago's more isolated islands, traditional clothing with red and black embroidery on white linen still appears at celebrations, song festivals, and community events, worn with the same pride as a flag. What truly defines Estonian women is not their appearance, but their attitude toward life. Estonia has one of the highest rates of female participation in the labor market in Europe. Estonian women work, run businesses, hold public office, and don't rely on outside approval to make their decisions. They are independent in a way that is neither performative nor ideological. It is simply the result of a culture where survival has always demanded that everyone, men and women, rise to the occasion. They also have an initial reserve that can be mistaken for coldness, but is actually just prudence. Estonians in general, and Estonian women in particular, don't open up their inner world to just anyone, but when they do it wholeheartedly, without half measures or games. An Estonian friendship is hard to win. Once won, it lasts for decades. Leave the number 9 in the comments if you think that kind of depth is worth the wait. Number 8. The world's most advanced digital republic. If you had to choose the country that has most radically embraced technology as a way to organize public life, the almost certain answer would be Estonia. This small Baltic country has been the world's most ambitious digital government laboratory for decades, and the results are so astonishing that delegations from all over the globe travel to Tallinn just to study how they did it. It all began after independence in 1991, when Estonia started from almost nothing. Destroyed infrastructure, a collapsed economy, and institutions to be built from scratch. Instead of copying the paper and stamp bureaucratic models used by the rest of the world, Estonia opted to skip that stage and build everything digitally. In 1997, when most countries were just beginning to talk about the internet, Estonia had already declared internet access a basic human right and was beginning to connect all its schools. The Estonian digital identity system is the most advanced in the world. Every citizen has an electronic identity card that serves as a key to almost everything. Voting in elections, signing contracts, accessing medical records, filing taxes, opening bank accounts, and registering a company. Registering a company can be done in just 15 minutes from any computer in the world. The digital tax filing system is so efficient that 98% of Estonians complete it in under 5 minutes, which in other countries means hours of queuing and paper forms. Estonia was also the first country in the world to use electronic voting nationwide starting in 2005. In the last parliamentary elections, more than half of the votes were cast electronically. And then there's e-residency, perhaps the boldest experiment of all. Since 2014, anyone in the world can apply for Estonian e-residency and gain access to the country's digital system to create and manage businesses within the European Union. There are already over 100,000 e-residents from more than 170 countries, many of them entrepreneurs from Asia, Latin America, and Africa, who use the Estonian platform as a gateway to the European market. Estonia doesn't have the natural resources of Saudi Arabia or the population of China, but it has something that in the 21st century is worth just as much, if not more, a system that works. Number 7. The culture shocks no one warns you about. If you ever decide to move to Estonia or simply visit for a while, there are some things no travel guide will fully prepare you for. The first and most important is the silence. Not the silence of nature, which is beautiful and expected, but the silence of people. Estonians are among the most reserved people in the world, and that's not an exaggerated stereotype. It's a deeply ingrained cultural trait that even has its own word in Estonian. Vaikimine, the art of silence. Get on a bus in Tallinn and chances are no one will look at you, no one will greet you, and no one will speak to anyone. It's not hostility, it's the norm. Estonians consider personal space and silence to be forms of mutual respect. Talking for the sake of talking or smiling at strangers can even raise eyebrows. A foreigner who tries to strike up a conversation with the person next to them might be met with a look somewhere between puzzled and slightly alarmed. Over time, you learn to interpret that silence not as rejection, but as the Estonian way of saying that everything is fine. Then there's the sauna. In Estonia, the sauna isn't a spa luxury or a weekend activity for the wealthy. It's a cultural institution so deeply ingrained that there are more saunas than churches in the country. Estonians go to the sauna with family, friends, and sometimes colleagues. The traditional Estonian sauna, the suitsusaun or smoke sauna, has been included on UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage. If you're invited to a sauna in Estonia, accept without hesitation. It's possibly the clearest sign that someone wants you to be part of their world. Another thing that baffles foreigners is the almost martial punctuality. Being late for an appointment in Estonia isn't a minor breach of etiquette, it's a declaration that you don't care enough about the other person. Estonians arrive on time or early, and when they say the meeting starts at 3 p.m., it starts precisely at 3 p.m. The visitor who arrives 10 minutes late will find that the conversation has already begun without them, and no one will pretend otherwise. The most well-known traditional Estonian liqueur is Vana Tallinn, a dark and aromatic herbal liqueur that is drunk neat, with hot milk or mixed with champagne on special occasions. Estonians drink it in silence in small groups with a certain seriousness that makes the act more akin to a ritual than a celebration. Number 6. The forest as a second home. If there is one thing that defines Estonians' relationship with their land more profoundly than any policy or historical monument, it is the forest. Estonia has one of the densest forest covers in Europe. More than half of the territory is covered in trees, and this constant presence is not just a geographical fact, it is part of the country's collective soul. Estonians have a word, metsäravas, which could be translated as people of the forest, and which for centuries described the relationship of rural communities with this green and silent environment. The forest was a refuge when invaders arrived, a larder when food was scarce, and the place where the old gods of pre-Christian Estonian pantheism remained present in every tree and every stream. Today, that relationship has transformed but not disappeared. Going to the forest in Estonia does not mean going on a sporty hike. It simply means going, walking without a specific destination, breathing in the air that smells of damp moss and pine bark, and returning home with a basket full of mushrooms or wild blueberries, depending on the season. Mushroom and berry picking in Estonia is almost a spiritual practice. There are families with their own secret corners of the forest, passed down from parents to children like invisible possessions. Places where the largest porcini mushrooms or the sweetest raspberries always grow. The bogs are another dimension of Estonian nature that surprises visitors. Estonian bogs, the open peat bogs under the gray Baltic sky, possess a beauty that takes time to appreciate but is then impossible to forget. Suma National Park, whose name means Land of Bogs, is home to one of the best preserved bog ecosystems in Europe. In spring, when the snowmelt brings the waters up, part of the park floods for weeks, and locals travel in wooden canoes above what are forest roads in the summer. They call it the 5th season of the year, and that poetic detail says a lot about how Estonians perceive time and change. Number 5. Estonia's dark and surprising gastronomy. Estonian cuisine isn't the most well-known in Europe, and that's precisely what makes it interesting. Without the weight of a global reputation to uphold, Estonian gastronomy has evolved according to its own logic. The cold that necessitates a search for calories, the coast that provides fish, the forest that offers game and mushrooms, and a history of scarcity that transform necessity into creativity. The most representative and most photographed dish in Estonian cuisine is verivurst, blood sausage. It's exactly what the name suggests. Pig intestines stuffed with blood, barley, and onions, boiled or fried until the skin is crispy and the interior is dark and dense. It's traditionally eaten at Christmas, accompanied by cranberry jam and sauerkraut, the fermented cabbage that's ubiquitous in Northern European cuisine. For the visitor arriving without expectations, verivurst can be surprisingly tasty. For those arriving with preconceived notions about its appearance, it can be a challenge worth overcoming. Mulgikapsad is another dish that unmistakably defines Estonian cuisine. It consists of sauerkraut slowly cooked with pearl barley and pork for hours, until all the flavors meld into a dense, tangy, and deeply comforting mixture that warms the body from the inside out. It's exactly the kind of food that makes sense when you look out the window and see the thermometer reading -12 degrees. Baltic fish are another cornerstone of the local cuisine. Smoked sprat served on dark rye bread with butter is perhaps the most iconic bite found in Estonian cafes and markets. Baltic salmon, inland river trout, and pike from Lake Peipus complete a selection of seafood and freshwater products that Tallinn's modern restaurants have reinterpreted with contemporary flair while maintaining their local essence. Dark rye bread deserves special mention because in Estonia it's not just a side dish, it's a food with its own distinct character. Dense, slightly sour with a tight crumb and firm crust, Estonian rye bread is baked in loaves that weigh several kilos and keep for weeks without losing quality. There are bakeries in Tallinn that bake dark rye bread following century-old recipes, and the queue outside in the morning is the best sign that something really good is coming out of the oven. To drink, there's keli, the Estonian version of kvass, a fermented dark bread drink slightly effervescent and tangy that refreshes in a way no commercial soft drink can replicate. And if the occasion calls for it, Tallinn, that dark herbal liqueur with notes of vanilla, cinnamon, and rum, is the quintessential national toast. Would you be able to try Christmas blood sausage if you were in Estonia? Number 4. The song that defeated an empire. There are moments in history when a people decides enough is enough, and the way that moment manifests itself says everything about who they are. Estonia had that moment between 1987 and 1991, and chose to express it in a way the world had never seen before, through song. What became known as the Singing Revolution was a series of mass demonstrations in which Estonians, along with Latvians and Lithuanians, gathered in squares, at festivals, and in open fields to sing songs banned by the Soviet regime, ancient folk songs, national anthems that had been forbidden to be sung in public for decades, compositions that spoke of forests and freedom, and of a land that was theirs even though someone else ruled it. The most impressive demonstration was the Baltic chain of 1989, when 2 million people formed a human chain over 600 kilometers long, linking Tallinn with Riga and Vilnius. Holding hands, they first stood silently, then sang, demanding their independence from the world. There was no mass violence, no guerrilla warfare, no armed revolution. There were songs, and it worked. On September 1st, 1991, Estonia regained its independence. This story explains why the Estonian Song Festival is much more than a cultural event. Held roughly every 5 years since 1869, the festival brings together tens of thousands of singers from across the country on Tallinn's large open-air stage, the Lauluväljak, where voices of all ages unite to perform the same repertoire their grandparents and great-grandparents sang before them. It is one of the world's greatest choral performances, and anyone who witnesses it in person invariably describes the same feeling, that of an entire country remembering aloud who it is. Number 3. Tallinn, the world's most digital medieval city. Walking through Tallinn's Old Town is a delightfully disorienting experience. The 14th century stone walls still stand, complete and well preserved. Medieval towers cast their shadows on cobblestones that have been in the same place for centuries. The facades of Hanseatic houses, with their pastel colors and pointed roofs, form streets that look like they've been lifted straight from a Northern European fairy tale. And amidst all this, Wi-Fi is free and lightning fast in every corner of the Old Town. Contactless card payments are the norm, even at market stalls. Government apps work just as well from a 15th century medieval tower as from a modern office building. This contrast is not accidental, it's Tallinn's identity. The city was founded in the 12th century, was for centuries one of the busiest ports on the Baltic Sea, and fell under Danish, Swedish, German, and Soviet rule at different historical periods, emerging from each period having absorbed something while remaining true to itself. Today, it has nearly 450,000 inhabitants, almost a third of the country's total population. The Old Town is divided into two parts that reflect the medieval social structure. The Upper Town, Toompea, was the stronghold of the nobility and the church, dominated by the castle that now houses the Estonian parliament. The Lower Town was the artisan trading center of the time and is now the most popular area for tourists, full of restaurants and galleries and buildings that are 4 or 5 centuries old. But Tallinn is not just the Old Town. The creative district of Teleskivi, where former factories have been transformed into art and gastronomic spaces, and the Kalamaja district with its brightly painted wooden houses, showcase a city that constantly reinvents itself without needing to demolish what it already has. Number 2. Lake Peipus and the Old Believers. On Estonia's eastern border, where the country meets Russia across the water, lies one of Europe's largest lakes, Lake Peipus, covering more than 3,500 square kilometers. This body of water has historically served as a border, a battleground, and a trade corridor between very different worlds. And on its Estonian shores lives a community so unique that for centuries it has managed to preserve its identity in a way that defies historical logic. The Old Believers are a community of Russian origin who fled to the shores of Peipus more than 3 centuries ago, expelled from Russia for refusing to accept the reforms of the Orthodox Church imposed by Patriarch Nikon in the 17th century. They settled in small villages along the lake's western shore, built their own churches with icons and rites that the rest of the Orthodox world had abandoned, and remained there. They survived Tsarist rule, World War I, the Soviet occupation, and Estonian independence. They remained. Today, these villages, with names like Kolkja and Kasapää, are places of extraordinary stillness where time seems to have stood still. unlike in the rest of Estonia. The older men wear long beards as tradition dictates. The women wear headscarves. The dark wooden churches with their golden icons exude that heavy scent of incense that makes you feel you've entered a sacred place before your mind even confirms it. The rituals are chanted in an old church Slavonic spoken no one outside these communities. And on the lake, the fishermen of Peipus still go out in their flatboats when the winter ice allows, using methods their great-grandfathers would know perfectly well if they could see them. Fishing for the vendis, a small white fish in the lake, remains a central activity in the family economy of these communities, and the pickled Peipus spring onions, grown in the fertile soil along the shore, are considered a high-quality gastronomic product throughout Estonia. Visiting the shores of Lake Peipus is to understand that history rarely disappears completely. Sometimes it simply steps aside, waits for the storm to pass, and then continues exactly where it left off. Number 1. The cost of living in Europe's most digital country. If you've ever considered moving to a European country with a high quality of life, modern amenities, stunning natural beauty, and a still reasonable cost of living compared to Western Europe, Estonia deserves to be high on your list. Although prices have risen considerably in recent years, especially after joining the euro in 2011, Estonia remains significantly more affordable than its Nordic neighbors, Finland, Sweden, and Norway, though more expensive than its Baltic neighbors Latvia and Lithuania. Rent for a one-bedroom apartment in central Tallinn ranges from 650 euros to 900 euros per month. Outside the historic center, the same apartment can be found for 450 euros to 600 euros. In smaller cities like Tartu, the country's second-largest city and home to Estonia's oldest university, prices drop to between 300 euros and 500 euros for a one-bedroom apartment. And in rural areas, it's possible to rent entire houses for prices that wouldn't even cover a room in any European capital. Food is where Estonia offers the best surprises. A set lunch at a local cafe, including soup, a main course, and a drink, costs between 5 and 8 euros. Eating at a mid-range restaurant in Tallinn's Old Town can cost between 15 and 25 euros per person, while high-end contemporary restaurants, of which there are many and of very good quality, rarely exceed 40 or 50 euros per person, including wine. A weekly shop for one person at an Estonian supermarket averages between 40 and 60 euros, with good quality local food at very reasonable prices. Public transport in Tallinn is free for registered city residents, a pioneering policy implemented by the municipality in 2013 and closely followed by cities around the world. For visitors, a single ticket costs less than 2 euros and a monthly pass is approximately 30 euros. The entire country is small enough that traveling by bus between Tallinn and Tartu, the two largest cities, costs around 10 euros and takes less than 2.5 hours. Public healthcare is of good quality for residents and is funded by Social Security contributions. Education is completely free from preschool through university for Estonian citizens. And the digital system we mentioned earlier has a direct impact on the cost of living. No queues, no bureaucracy, no time wasted on paperwork. The time citizens of other countries spend dealing with paperwork becomes time for living in Estonia. The Estonian paradox is that a country devastated just 30 years ago, which started from scratch after decades of occupation, now offers a quality of life that countries with far more money, much more territory, and much more time have not achieved. It wasn't luck. It was a collective decision to do things differently. And that decision, made quietly, pragmatically, and without much fanfare, may be the most valuable lesson Estonia has to teach the world. If you've made it this far in the video, Estonia is probably already on your travel bucket list. And if it wasn't before, it should be now. Like this video if this trip surprised you, subscribe for more true stories from places the world has yet to fully explore. And share this video with someone who still thinks Europe has no more secrets.